This is TWiT.
Big story this week from Microsoft. Actually, it was really interesting. The Information had a kind of more detailed article. You guys read it of the match in heaven, made in heaven, between OpenAI and Microsoft. Microsoft, one of the early founders, along with Elon Musk and others. And really, I think the idea of OpenAI was we better beat Google to the punch.
Interesting.
I
But
mean, I would argue that their statement was actually we want AI to be done in public, right?
Yes.
There was a lot of AI development that's going on that was kind of secretive, and they're like, hey, everybody should be able to see this. And that was the argument for what OpenAI was. And then the tech giant showed up. So now we can debate whether that's true anymore.
So, Richard, you'll enjoy this. What do you think? Remember when Microsoft was going to rename everything .NET, Windows.NET, Office.Net? What do you think of like Windows.ai, Office.ai?
you know, back in the days, remember when blockchain and Bitcoin were all the rage? Every company in the world
Back in the day, what do you mean, like 6 months ago? What are you talking about?
It's over now.
This wasn't the 1950s.
It's over. But every company wanted to spread a thin layer of blockchain over whatever they were doing.
Yeah, sure. Like a little
butter.
coating of butter.
Yeah. And now
toast.
It's AI, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm using
it's a dumb term. I mean, artificial intelligence is what you call something when it doesn't work. The moment it does work, it gets a new name. It becomes image recognition or voice synthesis.
Oh, that's a
natural.
But it's a nice bucket term that is being abused for sure. In fact, it was being abused years ago when Microsoft started saying, remember things like spell checking in Word or grammar checking? That's AI now. It's like, no, it is
really
an
old
AI.
term, right? Like Marvin Minsky coins that term in the 1950s to get military funding for his experiments. And I argue the first time the public heard the phrase artificial intelligence, it was 2001: A Space Odyssey. And then Hal tried to kill everybody. So kind of set up the relationship.
We've been through a number of AI winters because Minsky's promise was as is, by the way, OpenAI's an general artificial intelligence that could do anything like HAL 9000, including locking the pod bay.
By the way, I mean, Asimov solved the problem that later came up in 2001, right? You have the 3 rules of robotics or whatever. No, but
they're
I mean,
tautological. They're not. I don't think
would have solved HAL, is all I'm saying.
Well, okay. Yeah, don't hurt the astronauts. Might have been a good rule to write in.
Just a thought.
Just
Throw
a
that
thing.
One out there. They're on a Jupiter or whatever. Maybe I guess in the book it was Saturn. I think it was Saturn in the book, but whatever.
It was Jupiter.
It has to be the same because he wrote the book while the movie was being made.
I thought they changed the planet between the movie and the book. That could be
there wasn't any between the movie and the book. That's the whole point. Is like he says, "Well, what are you doing there?" Okay, let me write that down.
I know. Okay, I still have that in my head for some reason.
Yeah,
no.
Anyway, there may be. I don't know. You know what? There are believe it or not, on the internet, a few pedants who will let us know.
I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah. The internet.
That's good. I'm happy to hear that because I love being corrected. So,
Richard, make note of that. I just want to say. In fact, I'm sure Mary Jo will lend you the gong if you.
You're saying if I go on the internet, I could have this every day.
Every day you can be corrected.
Well, I'm going to check that out. That sounds fun.
I think we don't talk about it often, but one of the problems, and you will, everybody who does shows with us notes this, but we don't talk about it a lot, is that as soon as you're in the public eye, just raise your head a little bit, prairie dog a little bit out of the cubicle, and there'll be somebody to chop it off.
Oh, yeah, it's like it's like World War I. You don't want to be the first one to stick your helmet up out of the...
The Germans are waiting.
Yeah.
Where were we? Oh, we were talking about AI. So, and actually, AI is an interesting term. You think Marvin Minsky used it in more... not in a technical way, but it was really more a marketing term, Richard?
Well, it was a way to raise money, right?
Yeah.
Which is what when scientists speak publicly because they need money.
This is good.
That's sort of the reality.
I didn't realize.
Every time you see a press release about a technology, it's because they need money.
They want money.
Because if they have money, then they're busy doing stuff and they don't talk.
Well, and this is one of the issues with OpenAI. It is a .org. And even though it's not a nonprofit, they want to go back. They want it to be a 501c3 nonprofit. And so they're essentially telling the investors, Microsoft put $1 billion in. Look, guys.
Yeah, and by the way, when that happened
public
3 years ago, it was like, well, this will turn into something maybe in the future.
Wasn't a bad bet. So those,
but I mean, it didn't. I don't think it resonated at the time.
Well, if you're that big and you have that much cash, like Apple, like Microsoft, like Google, it's prudent to kind of say, well, we got to make some. It's like you're at a casino. We got to make some bets on what's next because we don't know what's next, and we don't want to miss it.
Their bets on VR and AR didn't pay off, and voice technology.
So we were talking about this yesterday on MacBreak Weekly. It really is apparent now that Apple is putting a lot of its current things like the Mac on back burner to move staff over to AR, VR. And I think that's a bad bet. I think Microsoft already has seen
what?
that.
It's worked out great for Meta. I don't understand where the criticism comes from.
Both Microsoft and Meta are at the other end of that line.
As a Microsoft person, I respect and trust what we're doing. It makes sense. I'm not going to worry about it. I think let them go. It's fun. Yeah. They can do their
Have
thing.
fun, Apple. I hope.
And by the way, while you're at it, make a car. That will be fun too. Yeah. You should make a car.
But that's that same thing. You're throwing spaghetti against the wall, hoping some of it sticks. You know?
Sometimes you make a Newton, and sometimes you make an iPhone.
Right. That's a very good point. So anyway, OpenAI has basically told its investors, look, we're not going to go public. So don't expect a big payday at the end of the road. They've renegotiated, according to the information, their deal with Microsoft to pay them a percentage of profits until they pay off the $1 billion. Mm-hmm. So now they're looking at making a ChatGPT professional
product. Yeah, that's right.
Professional. And Microsoft's announced that it's going to start using what? Tell me about this. What are they going to do?
Microsoft hasn't announced. That's
this was a rumor,
right? So, this is part of the information article. In other words, they haven't come out and said this. Although, since that article appeared, Panos Panay appeared at an AMD press conference at CS, which we'll get to, and did speak in very general terms about adding AI to Windows. Right. So, I think it's reasonable to, when you hear a rumor, like in fact, it was the Independent as well that reported earlier that Microsoft were going to put ChatGPT capabilities into Bing to better compete with Google search, et cetera. You kind of hear that and you say, okay, yeah, sure. I mean, whatever that means, whatever, but you could see that. It's not a huge leap to say, okay, there are all these, actually there aren't that many, but there are some AI capabilities across the Microsoft stack, Windows, Office, and elsewhere. So we're going to bring in this OpenAI technology and apply it to those products. Yeah, I mean, it's so logical. You know what's happening. And we've gotten some implicit confirmation. Microsoft has never literally come out and said, hey, this is what we're doing. But, this year, who knows? Build, we always talk about future shows. I mean, Build would be an obvious place, an obvious time for Microsoft to start talking this stuff up a little more strategically and a little more explicitly, right? How they intend to add, AI capabilities across the stack. So we'll see. What I did was go back and look at some of the stuff that they did announce over the past few years since OpenAI and the investment in 2019, and see like what have they done that kind of hints at this future, right? So the stuff, I listed this in the notes, but there's weird little things like Microsoft released a Surface Pro X, which is the first ARM-based Surface product in 2019, which is the first Surface-based product to also feature an NPU, a neural processing unit, that offloads AI tasks from the CPU and GPU and puts them onto the separate silicon, like Apple has been doing in Apple Silicon, et cetera. It's interesting, but it's also in a really niche product that very few people ever bought. And at the time of its announcement, there was nothing that could take advantage of it, right? There was nothing out there. So in 2020, they announced a feature called eye contact. This is that creepy thing. Remember?
Oh, yes. I hated that.
So we're on a call and I'm looking down, but it makes my eyes look like they're looking at the camera. Creepy. But the interesting thing about that is it requires that NPU. So at the time of the announcement, the only product that could run it or offer it was Surface Pro X. In 2021, they had a hybrid work event for Windows 11 and Microsoft 365. And one of the things they announced was, they didn't call it this at the time, but they later came up with the name Windows Studio Effects, which is eye contact, that previous thing, plus voice clarity, voice focus, automatic framing, portrait blur, and background blur.
That demo was very impressive, where they had the leaf blower behind them. And
yeah, exactly. Right. So most I review a lot of laptops. So a lot of PC makers have features like this, not all of them, not always as good, but this notion of like background blur is something we've had for a while. Automatic framing, like this idea that if I shift over here, the webcam will adjust with me, which I've turned off in this camera, but this camera supports that. And various microphone and webcam technologies. Windows Studio Effects sounds really great, but guess what? It requires an NPU, which none of you have, right?
That's unique in Surface.
It's Surface Pro X, not just Surface, but the Qualcomm-based version of Surface, right?
But it's Qualcomm technology?
Microsoft says they built the NPU.
Oh,
so Microsoft has a what they call an SQ1, SQ2, whatever processor, which is basically the latest Qualcomm Snapdragon Silicon. I don't know that they do anything to change it other than in this case they've added the NPU to it. I don't believe it's in die. I think it's a separate chip, but I don't. It doesn't really matter. The Windows Dev Kit, right? Project Volterra last year, this Mac Mini looking thing that developers can buy $500-600, whatever it is, and program on ARM. I've made the argument. I think Richard would probably agree with this. Like, I think one of the weird things that wasn't clear about this thing from day one was, or at the beginning was, wouldn't a developer kind of be better off with like a Surface tablet or something? Because part of the point of ARM is you've got constant connectivity with 5G, you have touch and multi-touch. You have, the tablet form factor. You're swiping and doing all that kind of stuff.
No
and
developer wants to work on a tablet.
No. In other words, you buy one. You're doing all your coding on an Intel box.
Oh, I see.
And you're remoting it. You're remoting into the app on the ARM box.
So you have the tablet sitting next to you, and you're looking at it as an emulator, or not emulator.
But the reason they did this was because it has an NPU, right? That's right. Although again, you could get the Surface Pro X or whatever. Surface Pro 9 this past year was announced. The 5G version is the next version of Pro X, also has an NPU. But since this time, both Intel and AMD have announced that they're creating NPU silicon, either integrated into their processors. That's going to be the way forward. Or in the case of the 13th gen desktop chips, there's actually going to be an M2 based add-on NPU. So if you have a desktop 13th gen, you're going to be able to add it on late after the fact if you want, or at build time.
Because that kind of all brings directly on the bus, so they'll get the same. They'll get the same. It's close to not being on the silicon, but being close to it.
Honestly, it's probably a better approach because you can update that thing, and when it's in silicon, we want to get it right before it becomes part of the CPU or whatever, or the SoC.
But you notice all these MPU projects were ARM projects because it's relatively easy to do that. You need Intel participation if you want to do it inside of an Intel chipset.
Right.
And I hate that we call this stuff AI. These are all machine learning things, right?
Isn't that AI, though? Doesn't that qualify as AI? If it's
nominally, it's under the umbrella, but it's an implementation, right?
Yeah, it's almost, a lot of times you'll see like AI/ML is, how.
So here's, let me pitch this to you as my way of distinguishing it. Most coding, you're both coders, is algorithmic. It's a von Neumann machine. It's you do this, and if that happens, then do this. And it's absolutely deterministic.
Sure.
AI, based on knowledge gained by machine learning, makes its own rules, often rules that are obscure or unknown to the humans. And so it's probably still deterministic, but we don't even know what the code is because it's internal in a giant learning database. So that's AI. I mean, it's not HAL 9000 AI. It's
well, but you're describing like a black box, basically.
It's kind of like a black box, and the information in the black box is garnered by looking at a lot of examples. Or in the case of like AlphaGo, the Go playing machine, playing 1 billion games against itself and creating a rule set known only to itself.
You're at that point, Leo. It's like normally with programming, I have a set of inputs. I know what outputs I intend. I write the algorithm.
There's a heuristic, and it's created by the human.
Right.
Yeah.
In machine learning, where we use neural nets, which is these adversarially generated networks, we have a set of inputs, we have a set of known outputs, and we train the neural net to generate those correct outputs from the learning model. Right. So you get into this idea of training, and that what it's then quote unquote learned is a set of statistical weights in a neural net that are very hard for us to interpret.
Yeah, it's a machine generated heuristic.
I like that you added air quotes around learned, because I would argue that these machines are in fact sentient.
We use And this is probably the reason it's fuzzy language. We use a lot of anthropomorphic terms as if
as we do.
Problem.
We do this to animals. We apply human terms to animals. Of course, we're going to do it to the
So that's why I said maybe a rule set would be a better way, or a heuristic that is a heuristic that is generated from massive amounts of examples. That's how ChatGPT works.
Leo, that's like suggesting that spell checking is just about looking up words in a database. It's so much more intelligent than that.
well, I mean, think about this. Spell checking, though, is still a human-generated heuristics. We have a list of words. We compare the list. We say, I think you mean that.
There is a machine learning model for that, which is that
how close
are all the ways that people. Here are all the ways that people
and also
misspell
context
words imply other misspellings.
Right. Yeah. So there's a part of that. You're right. The heuristic can be, if it's advanced spell checking, using fuzzy matching instead of direct matching.
Yeah. And all these products that he's listed off, they're all machine learning models.
Right.
But
I think that's AI. I don't think it's HAL 9000, but it's AI, right?
Well, but the point of this is, but I think this is the important point. We're kind of on the cusp. This is happening in a way that quantum computing isn't happening. Remember a couple of years ago, Microsoft talked about quantum computing all of a sudden and then was silent about it for years, right? Like, I think the point is with these MPUs, right, doing to this kind of processing what we do with GPUs for graphics, and now for other things, right? Offloading that from the CPU makes something possible that wasn't possible before at, well, not so much at scale, but just on pedestrian hardware.
Faster, right?
Right. It is allowing something to happen in real time that couldn't have happened in real time before. And that's I think, what puts us over the edge of this kind of interesting new generation.
But turns it into a consumer product.
There is a magic. And I hate to use that term. There is a point, a point of, I don't know, critical learning or whatever. So for instance, I could write a chess is deterministic. I could write a chess playing program that would just do it all.
And they did.
And they did, but they're so slow that they can't compete against a grandmaster. Using this means I was able to do a better rule set, and now I could beat any human. That's one thing, but I think the thing Stable Diffusion or DALL-E does with the art images, that's a different.
It has to go way past this. This is right. This is an advanced version of something we've had for a long time. What you just described, right? In other words, to beat a chess master, you, as whatever you are, a human being, a machine, whatever, have to know about that guy. You have to know what his weak spot. You don't just know the rules.
No, machines don't. Machines don't.
No, I know, but that's the point. In other words, I think this is where this has to go. Like, it has to, for it to be truly intelligent.
Well, that's just more learning. That's just more rules, generated. So it's interesting because there are a lot of chess engines, the very best chess engines, in fact, except for Alpha, are doing exactly that. They ingest real games. Alpha learned by playing itself, by playing a billion games in a very fast way. So it isn't learning from human games. It's learning from its own games. The styles are different, yes. Alpha is probably a better engine, although Stockfish, which is the current best chess engine, learned just from games. It didn't play itself. It doesn't do it that way. That's a GAN, by the way. That's a GAN that Alpha's using, a generative network, as opposed to we
got to kind of bring this back to what this means to Microsoft.
Well, but I think we got to define the terms. So, Microsoft, by the way, the rumor is going to put $10 billion in. Is that right?
Yeah, and the goal is to using that same payback system you mentioned. That at the end, if everything goes well, at the end, Microsoft will own 49% of OpenAI.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And that's a rumor too, right? To be clear, they've not announced this, but in keeping with what you just said, that is.
And it's probably true. And
it sounds like it.
And their goal is probably more, not so much to make money on it, although it's a good way to hedge a bet.
I don't think it's
maybe
about
to
making
use
money
it in Windows, right?
Right. That's exactly right. To use it everywhere, across the stack. That's what I mean. In other words, we already have Windows and Office and all that stuff. We have the Microsoft Graph. We have Azure, right, where they sell compute and other services, right? So
I'd also argue that OpenAI is an arm's length thing. There's going to be some legal issues around these machine learning models. There already are.
Very good.
So
that's right.
It's not us. We didn't do it.
It's OpenAI.
I was the AI.
I didn't do it.
Yeah. I mean, you checked the box and said it was okay. I did. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that I don't know about you guys, but many of our other hosts are of the opinion that we are at a watershed moment in AI. That was my point. In other words, in the Microsoft space, thanks to Terry Myerson, we have been talking about this notion of the next wave for years now, right? In other words, Microsoft felt that they missed the next wave when that wave was smartphones, right? They missed it. They lost. They thought for a while that maybe the next wave was voice assistants, They did Cortana first in Windows Phone and then onto the PC, and that didn't go anywhere. And the technologies behind it still exist and still around, and they're used elsewhere. That's fine. There is, I think, a really good case. Sorry. Some people believe AR, VR could be the MR, whatever you want to call it. No, it's not. No, forget it.
No, I know. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that there are people who believe that, right?
Yes.
And they're wrong. but there is I think that the best possible case to make, it's funny, I was just going to write an article about the next wave, and the thing I was going to write was those other things I just described, well, not all of them, but AR, VR, MR, et cetera, voice assistants.
I think you wrote the article, or did you have ChatGPT write it in your absence?
No, I wrote the article.
Okay.
If you go to, if you went to CS, one of the things you would have seen is like Google's not talking up Google Assistant anymore. They're talking about Android instead. Like they're kind of shifting the messaging on this stuff. Just like Cortana as a brand has essentially disappeared, but those technologies still exist throughout the stack. They're kind of shifting what the emphasis is when they talk about it.
They're not products
they have become
anymore.
These things have become ingredients in existing popular platforms.
Yeah.
I think AI actually will be similar in that way, right? They're going to add AI to their existing popular platforms. Like that's kind of the point. But I think both of you will appreciate this comparison, which I think I do make in that one article I did put up, which is this has the potential to do, I'm just going to focus on Windows for 1 second, to Windows as we know it today, what NT did back in 1993, or really in 2000, 2001, whatever, which is we have this thing called Windows. It's still called Windows. It looks like Windows. It feels like Windows. It runs Windows apps, but actually under the covers, it's very different from the Windows that we started with. And I think there's it's interesting. I don't want to call it an ingredient, but I think AI has the power to transform Windows and Office and whatever else, right? I kind of focus on Windows a little bit because the way my brand is, but I think I've been kind of looking at like what could be the next NT in the scheme of things with Windows. Listen, not too long ago, a week, 10 days ago, I was like, the best we can do is add tabs to Notepad. We're not doing anything with the platform. This is terrible. And then this happens, and it's like,
So I use a search engine. I started using a search engine. I'm very interested in it. Created by ex-Googlers called Neva. It's a paid search engine, $5 a month if you want the pro version. There's a free version. But one of the things Neva just turned on is AI in its search results. There was a story that Google was shivering in their boots over all of this, right? That they were afraid they were going to. Yeah. So just as an example, here's a Google search. How do I choose Firefox as my browser in Windows? And what Google does in its knowledge snippet is it just steals something from support.mozilla.org.
Steal is a strong word.
But let me show you what Neva does. Neva actually has its AI go out and get it from a variety of places to generate a prose thing. And then notice, in order to do attribution, they have footnotes. This one's not really great because it only has 2 sources, but in many of its searches, it'll have multiple sources, which it then uses. It's not using ChatGPT, but a ChatGPT-like AI to synthesize. That's one thing ChatGPT seems to be very good at, is kind of summarizing content. And I actually find this works a little bit better, and it also gets Neva off the hook because they're not just stealing content.
Google has spent the past, I want to say, 5 years negotiating with various locales over what you just showed, which is they're scraping news
snippets
from publishers and just publishing it on their own website. Yes. So these guys have all gotten together. They've sued Google, and Google is now, promoting it as something that like they designed. It's like, we have Google for publishers. We're going to give you because we got a class action lawsuit going here.
Let me see what happens. Who's the president of Egypt? Now Google, and this completely, it doesn't even give credit at this point.
Right.
But this is from Wikipedia, right? Let me just see what
it says. Wikipedia on the right side.
On the right,
on the right
in this knowledge box.
But there's all these images
box?
over there, and
it doesn't say where that came from at all.
Sure.
It definitely came from Wikipedia. Let's try it here. Who is the president of Egypt? This is Neva, and it's a little slow, but there. And there we go. There's an example.
So this is AI like constructing the answer as you watch.
using these sources, which is
so basically this is just Google with credit, like it's
but I think it's also more sources, which is interesting, including planetrulers.com.
That's awesome.
Which I thought was a place where you could buy rulers, but apparently no.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's kind of interesting. Obviously, this is early days. They just released this a few days ago. But I think that this is what Google's nervous about is and why Microsoft might be very interested in this. Wouldn't Bing benefit from this kind of thing?
Google, here's a little heads
Bing
up.
Needs something.
Bing needs something.
Microsoft used to focus only on Windows. Apple used to only focus on the iPhone. I'm just going to throw out the little hint. Maybe, just maybe, you should have other products.
Yeah. Well, and they're trying, but they really haven't done anything to improve search in a long time. I'll circle back on the machine learning.
Is Bing still important to them?
Yeah, I think Bing? It is. They spend a lot of money on it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, and they call it out in every earnings it generates dollars per quarter, Leo. I don't know.
Yeah.
Dollars per quarter is my new measure.
Single digit. No, it's billions in revenues.
We call it DPQ. Forget
exactly.
ARPU.
I
got DPQ.
It's actually, most of the money comes through a virtual tip jar. It's
that's pretty much our model.
It's like I worked for a bank one time that was going out of business, and I gave the guy his paycheck in cash, and he handed me back the change, and he said, "Here, you probably need this more than I do."
There's actually
it's like that kind of thing.
There's a great story which we're going to talk about next on Twig about a guy who used the Office Space model of stealing pennies from it for transactions.
Which, by the way, is from Superman 3, by the way.
All right. But he had a folder called Office Space on his computer.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, Richard, you were about to go to loop back on this AI ML.
And my concern about the AI term is that you generalize around these things, and it has suddenly you got the HAL implications. When you think in terms of machine learning models, the important part is that training is far more computationally intensive than executing a model. And so suddenly the cloud's a big role in this. One of the reasons Microsoft is all over these technologies is you need Azure, right? This is Azure's ability to render those models quickly for you is an important part of it. Then you can run them on a phone, but you got to make them first. And that takes a lot of compute.
Both Microsoft and Google Amazon have invested heavily in offering what Google calls them TPUs, which are basically hardware Microsoft designed around learning.
Just bought a TPU company, didn't they?
Yeah.
Isn't that
so that you as a data scientist or somebody using AI will go, I'm not going to do this locally. I'm going to use Azure to do this. Yeah.
And that's exactly it. It is a best served as a cloud product. And that's what these companies are all desperate for is what do people need the cloud for? As long as the cloud's about saving money, it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
As soon as it's the only place I can run this on the cloud, that has margin.
Let me ask you a question. What is the cloud's benefit? Is it massive storage plus processing power? And couldn't you duplicate that locally?
I'm sorry, in this particular use case, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, why do I need Azure to do these AI models? Couldn't I do this locally?
It's computational.
It's both computational and storage, right?
Yeah. You're right. Those are the two big things. And they can afford to optimize a set of hardware, particularly for the purpose, because they can rent it out multiple times. By the time you're buying enough, how many machine learning models does your organization need to train? Why would you own that stuff?
I mean, people do Bitcoin mining locally, not in the cloud, because they want to keep the cash.
Yeah, because the margins aren't right.
Yeah.
Right? This is about, the amount of money you need to spend to be able to render sophisticated models quickly for the number of times you need to do it. Yeah. It's a utility computing problem. And so
because you don't do it over and over. You do it maybe you'll do it a few times.
Yeah.
But for instance, when I do Stable Diffusion, when I want to generate images of myself and I upload 20 pictures of myself, And I'm going to do that once and use those pictures forever, right? Those AI
if
generated.
you went back to 2007 and said what you just said, you would be shot as a time traveler.
But it's amazing.
What did you say? When I use Stable Diffusion on my smartphone to make blah blah blah, you're like, people are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
but now this is just
together.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But don't you think? Nonsense. I mean, this is very appealing because I look so good. This is very appealing to people. Is that, and you're not going to do this again and again.
The red one makes you look like David Byrne.
I know.
There you go.
I know. I think this is my future profile picture from now on.
There you go.
Yeah, gorgeous.
But that's still a case where you're using a model as opposed to generating a model. Building the model in the first place on the back end is kind of a rarely done thing.
No, because I'm uploading 20 images. I'm creating a new, if you've used Stable Diffusion, use checkpoints. Yes, they have these big checkpoints that you use, but you're also creating a new checkpoint with your images. So you are doing training on those images.
And they best served in the cloud.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I'm not going to do this. I did put Stable Diffusion on my computer at home.
I mean,
have
someday
enough
we'll have a
horsepower
Raspberry
to do
Pi that does this for us locally, but for now.
Well, that MPU is a big part of it. By the way, if anybody wants any old seasonal pictures of me.
Oh, great.
Amazing.
I've got myself. Now, this is the one I'm not going to use.
I like the art in that one.
That's a lot of abs.
Leo in a Speedo is not an
That's
image.
why we asked for separate hotel rooms.
Yeah,
when we
exactly.
travel.
But I loved it for the holidays. I was able to generate all these kind of Father Christmassy.
That's
funny.
I ended up using this as my profile picture. It's a little scary and weird, but that's AI for you. Scary and weird. Tech Break is brought to you by ACI Learning. Training leaders and professionals for over 40 years, ACI Learning believes proper training is essential to lifelong learning and growth. ACI Learning, transforming the way technology professionals learn to fuel the modern workforce. Visit acilearning.com and let ACI power up your IT team.